output and get back to the state so that we can generate the code from the bind the code from the code behind. So we have removed the grid, the pager, and we will also remove the domain data source from the XAML. So we are back to the empty home view. Now let's drag a unbound data grid onto the screen. Let's do some formatting. For visibility's sake, let's set some attribute. Make the minimum height as 100. Also, I don't want to generate the columns manually, so I'll set the auto generate column to be true. Although you can do that quite easily from the properties tab. So we have a data grid that does not have any data bound to it. It's also put in a data pager. Now again, both the controls are unbound. It is not bound to any data. So first let's just bind the grid with the complete data, and then next step we'll try doing paging onto it. So what we need is a user domain context. Now if you see, the IntelliSense is providing me the class which is actually there in the server side. So we create an instance of the user domain context, the context object, and we set our data grid. We need to build it once. And we set our data grid item source to be context.users. Now another interesting thing that RIA service did is it identified the attribute for context based on the query. And now all we need is to load this context with data. And we want the context to load using getUsers query. Let's run. So we'll see a grid containing the complete data onto it with no paging. Now let's do paging. Now before we utilize the RIA services ability of paging, let's do it the conventional way using paged collection view. And the list on which it has to do paging is context.users. And the data grid should be bound to this paged. Data pager should be bound with the same paged. If we run the application now, so we have the paging functionality in place again, but let's check at what's happening in the background. How is the data fetched from the database? So if you see this time, the complete data is provided. The query is not modified. So what is happening in this case is the complete data set is provided to the client, and the paging is happening on the client side using the paged collection object, paged collection view object. And if you have large volume of data, it's not wise to have the complete data on the client application. So we'll try to modify this implementation to utilize the RIA services paging ability. And for that, what we need is domain data context. We'll remove the entire code. First, we need the domain data source. And we want to assign the domain context of this domain data source to be user domain context, which was the same object we used earlier. And then we assign a name to it. And then we assign a query name to it. And then we need to set our data grid, item source to be the data source data property, and data pager source to be the same data source data property. And since we have dynamically created domain data source object, we need to add it to our layout. Further, if you want to do some error handling, you might want to add an event to the loaded data, add an event handler to the loaded data event, and this we can do the error handling. Now let's run the application again. So this time you see is the query is again being modified based on the pager. So it only retrieves the required data set of data that is required to display in the client application. So we have utilized the same data paging ability that is provided from the RIA service, although binding data dynamically to the controls. Apart from this, RIA Services has many more things to offer, and I'll try to create blog posts corresponding to each in due course of time. And if you have any comment or feedback on this implementation, please feel free to put in your comments. Thank you.